We have Rebecca, or Becca, as we call her, Vega, who, what semester were you editor of the paper?
I don't really remember, so
It's,
spring, I want to say like 2020.
okay, so it's been a few years ago. Lauren Gandara, who was editor of the paper last semester. Alexandra Scoville, who is editor of the paper right now. And Joey Baruman, who was editor when?
2010.
Fall 2010.
Yeah.
So that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So, okay, and so obviously Becca and Joey have moved on, and Alex and Lauren are still here at Cerritos College. So, who wants to start first? You saw the film. Did it reflect reality?
Yes. Pretty funny at some points because I felt like I could actually see myself being one of the characters in the film, especially the managing editor, because I think when I was managing editor, that was probably the time that I most enjoyed it. And she brought up a lot of points of apathy, which was she felt that people just didn't care either about news as people outside. So the readers didn't care about what they were reporting on, as well as the reporters themselves in the newspaper didn't care about what was going on, what they had to report on. So I thought that was pretty accurate. I saw a lot of the advisor in Mr. Cameron, which was, that made me laugh a couple of times because he was really hopeful and he wanted to coach the students to kind of, I guess, kind of snap out of just being within the paper and wanted them to see the whole picture as far as what newspapers do within the community, which is they provide a very valuable service. So that's what I saw.
So first, I'd like to say people in newspapers aren't as nerdy as the people in that video, so don't like go around thinking everyone's that bad. But in reality, like she said, it's very much like a close-knit, like tight group of people who are really working to produce something. You don't really get readership. I mean, how many people here have actually picked up the paper outside? You know, 4. So I mean, imagine on a wider scale. It's really a small knit group of people, I guess, who are really producing or trying to produce this paper. On one side, no one's reading it. On the other side, there's people in their own class who they're somewhat leaders of, and they're not producing work either. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense of where people aren't producing in your class, so you have to kind of pick up the work for them. But then even when you do that extra work and you go that extra mile, not a whole lot of people are actually even reading the news. So it can be defeating at times, but it's also very, very rewarding when things kind of turn out the way you hope them to.
Every Wednesday that the paper comes out, we like some of the editors and staff writers go and actually deliver the paper throughout the campus, and we get some back. And even though we get some back, it kind of like hurts us because these are the papers no one picked up to read, and it doesn't affect like our job there. Like we can say, oh, no one's gonna pick it up. Like, why do we write anything in it? But we do it because we like it, and some people actually do read it. And so it does, like, however many papers we get back, it doesn't change like the work that we do. And it's always, you know, we try really hard to be as thorough as, you know, they are in the movie, because they know that they're really like, oh, what is this, and they look at everything, like the copy editing process. And I think there's times where we can do that more, but we definitely try to keep that in the paper as well.
And you have this group of people that you're trying to get to cover every aspect of the campus, and it's a hard job because not everybody wants to participate in what needs to get done. And that's where the challenges come in, where, okay, we need to assign things, and in the movie, you know, they were trying to find out a balance of being able to cover every aspect within a reasonable amount of time so that they could get it in their paper, so that it could get picked up. And that's where things get a little tricky, because you have to find a balance, and you also have to try to motivate your reporters to go cover the things that people actually care about.
It's really hard. We almost have to act like mind readers in a way, because we have to like know what, you know, the rest of the school is going to want to hear about. And sometimes at the newspaper, we will get not into fights, but we'll get into discussions on, is this important or not? And some writers think that, you know, like we always have people who really want to write about video games, and I always argue with them that they write way too much about it, but they say that there's a lot of people at school that play video games. So, like, you know, you always have to kind of fight for what you want to write about, because you have to think, like, you know, there are other people out there like you, but at the same time, there's other people out there like me that don't want to always have to read about video games. They want to hear about something else too. So, I mean, that's not what our whole paper is, but that's what, like, that's just one example of something that people want to write about that we go through and, like, we argue about. So it's like, you kind of have to be a minor. You have to think, do people really want to hear about this? But if there's something worth writing for, I think, you know,
Well,
someone's going to want to read it.
One thing that's I think important to mention is, I'm not sure if you guys know, but Talon Marks is an entirely student-run newspaper, meaning that Mr. Cameron, Alicia, nobody, no teacher ever looks at that paper and says you can or can't do this. It's her decision or her decision alone to run a story. Anything she wants to run naked people in the newspaper, she can run naked people in the newspaper. So it's very much, she's kind of given the same responsibility as any professional journalist out there. Actually, not even that, because I work for paper right now and I can't run it whenever I want. So, I mean, it's very, very, very much a real newspaper. People kind of perceive it as, oh, it's just a student newspaper. She can get sued. She can get, you know, sued for libel. She can get thrown in jail. She can, I mean, exact same consequences as a real newspaper, except she doesn't have professional editors or, you know, or professional writers working for her, and they don't get paid. Other than that, I mean, it's very much a legitimate newspaper, and the consequences of releasing a story that might ruffle some feathers, or being a bad newspaper are very much valid in this sense.
Yeah, and trying to balance the important stuff with the interesting stuff. You also have to get the important stuff going on campus. Like, if there's something going on within the Board of Trustees that needs to get covered, and if it doesn't, you're missing out on a big story. So, and you also have to be accurate, because if you screw up, you can get people in trouble, and it all falls on you, and that's a lot of pressure. But when you get it right, and it's a good story, then it's worth covering, whether or not you're putting yourself at risk of being inaccurate and, you know, getting someone in trouble. That's, yeah.
Have you guys had to deal with any ethical issues like we did in the film?
I don't know how you guys,
I
haven't.
I did, and it's actually never run, and not a lot of people actually even know about this. When I was editor, there was a student on student government, and she worked for a gentleman's club. She was actually like in the student government. So I found out about this, and it was really my choice to run the story or not run the story. What does the public really get from me telling everybody that there's a, you know, adult entertainer working for the student government? Does it hurt her? Definitely. I mean, it would probably end up making this girl drop out of school. So you have to face ethical issues almost every day. I mean, even to the sense of like pictures. I mean, you know, there's the little what is it, daycare center over there. You run into a big problem with that, just because these kids aren't 18 or over. So if you take pictures of a little kid sliding down the slide, who's to say that their dad or their mom, who is in their lives, won't see this picture and won't come looking for them and end up kidnapping a kid? So you kind of have to look at things from more than just one perspective. I mean, telling the story is one thing, and that's what you're here to do, but you also have to keep in mind the consequences of the story you're telling, and is it going to be beneficial enough to, you know, to basically ruin someone's life? So that's kind of a question that you have to ask on every single story that ever, I guess, is published in your paper.
Yeah, we had one this semester too. The story read, but some of the quotes in it I took out because it was a feature on a student who like was talking about some stuff in his past, and like he didn't want it to like affect, like he didn't want his boss basically to find out or anything like that. He didn't want, like, you know, his work people to find out, and they could easily have picked up the paper. So the parts where he was like afraid of losing his job, I was like, okay, yeah, like this, like, you know, story isn't worth someone losing their job, or unless it had something to do with, like, you know, the campus. You know, there's certain, you have to like weigh the options. You know, you have to see how does it really affect, you know, their life. Because, I mean, if it's something that they did here on campus that, like say, you know, a teacher hit a student or something like that, right? That story, like, obviously the teacher might lose their job, but how do we not run it because it happened to a student? So you kind of have to run into those kind of issues too. But sometimes they happen and sometimes they're not as big. Like, ethical issues sometimes is something as little as, oh, they cussed in a quote or something like that. And then sometimes it's a lot bigger, like what Joey dealt with. So it just depends on like the staff and it depends on what happens during your time.
Have you guys received any like backlash as far as like receiving a letter to the editor type thing?
Oh yeah.
That happened a lot. I got one my first semester on staff for writing a story for culinary arts, and it was like an opinion story, and I mentioned that they didn't get paid, or I barely even remember what happened, but I got so much back from that about whether or not they got paid and the work they really did. And like, even if you write a simple opinion story, you still have to do your research, and so that's what I learned. That even though you're writing, it's just your opinion, you know, you still have to have facts behind it, you know, it's still research. But yeah, we get some letters to the editor, some make no sense sometimes, it's just people who want to rant. We've had, was it like 2 semesters ago, we got some really bad ones about like the paper in general, and then for us, it's like you want to like, obviously everyone's going to have their opinions, you know, about how the paper looks, about the stories in it, about the people who work for it. And to get letters from people outside of it that criticize it, at the same time we're like, you know what, you could come and like help us and change it. And it's kind of like if you're not part of, if you're not part of the problem, if you're part of the problem, you're not part of the solution or something like that, that saying. But sometimes we get good ones too. The good ones come a lot fewer. We got one a few weeks ago, no, it was like last week, about a correction to an article that we actually made but didn't go online. So we knew about it, so I just wrote back saying like, you know, thank you, we knew about this, it wasn't added on. So sometimes it's not that big of a deal, but.
Probably when Mr. Cameron gets a call and like he calls you into the office and you have to deal with whoever it is that's on the phone. So it could be for any kind of thing. Usually it's certain groups on campus who feel that they are either misrepresented or underrepresented, which is something that also came up in the film as far as, you know, like diversity. Sometimes people feel, or instructors, you know, other advisors for other clubs, they see the paper as a way to kind of advertise for themselves. And if they don't see that you're covering their events and putting their name out there in a good way, then they feel that you are attacking them personally. So they don't see the newspaper as a way to accurately reflect what is going on. We report facts. We're not here to necessarily help you look good, and we're not here to necessarily make you look bad. But if something bad happens and it's associated with your club, well, then that's what we're gonna report. If we get a quote from someone who, you know, doesn't like whatever it is that you're doing on campus, and that's what we're gonna report. It's not a way for us to advertise that you're having, you know, a bake sale, or, you know, that you're doing something good for the community when maybe that's not very visible to us.
And one thing that's hard, it kind of goes with what Becca said, that I know Lauren has dealt with. I don't know so much about Joey and Becca, but the faculty members here stay here longer than we are and stay here longer than the staff is. So you can get backlash from a club and like they remember, like people remember what we write. Like students, you know, they come and go. Maybe some are here for a semester or two. They'll read a story, they might not like it. They go to a different college, they forget about it. But the faculty here will remember what you write for like a really long time. And what sucks, and it's no one here's fault, but if something happens like 3 semesters ago with a teacher, they didn't like the story, they're going to remember that, and when you go to interview that teacher 2 semesters later, they just, you know, assume that you're going to do the same thing that a staff writer 3 semesters ago did. So that's a challenge of being at a community college paper, because maybe at a paper in general, that relationships, like you really have to build solid relationships. And I know some editors get frustrated because they built a good relationship and then the editor right after like kind of messes that up, and you have to really keep them well because they remember. And the faculty member, like, you know, Linda Lacey's going to be here when Lauren transfers, you know, when I transfer, she's probably still going to be here. I know she was here for semesters way before me, so if she sees something that she doesn't like in a paper, it might affect like semesters that had nothing to do with that. So that's one thing you have to watch out for is the relationships and how you interview people and what you say to them and what you write. So that's one thing that kind of hurts us because then we don't get stories because one reporter messes it up. Yeah.
Within the group, do you guys ever have conflict on what should go in the newspaper, what shouldn't, within the staff?
That happens
All the
almost
time.
every day.
like conflict, like
Every day.
fist fights, because I've seen that. But there's definitely conflict. The way, the one kind of universal like truth about journalism is that for the most part, it's all facts. So whether I think the story is a good story or not, if that's the facts, if that's what happened, then there's not really a whole lot to debate about that. You know, it's like this guy, I remember when I was here, one of the security officers hit a girl on a skateboard. You know, and people were like, it's an outrage. You know, she was on a skateboard, she shouldn't be on a skateboard. He was driving too fast. I mean, there was a bunch of different opinions about what really happened and whose fault it was. That's when you're kind of lucky as a journalist to just say, you know what, I reported what happened, and this is what happened. You guys decide if you want it, if you think it's her fault, if you think it's the security officer's fault. So that's kind of a good thing with journalism is you just really deal with the facts. It isn't until you start getting into opinions that you can really get into like a big debate in the newsroom. But then when you get into debate in the newsroom, we do, and I'm sure they still do it, is what they have is a editorial board, a mix up of all the editors on the newspaper, and they discuss, you know, their stance as a newspaper on any particular subject. When I was here, there was another story involving the cops here. They're actual real police officers. They can go outside and they can arrest somebody just the same way as Downey Police or Lakewood Police can do, except they didn't have guns here. I think one of only 2 community colleges in California that police weren't allowed to carry guns. I mean, they're full-fledged cops, went to police academy, but they weren't allowed to carry guns. So what would happen if, you know, there were an active shooter situation on campus? They didn't have guns to protect us. So as an ed board, we kind of talked about it, I mean, over and over again for about a week. And then we kind of came to the conclusion, you know, I mean, not everybody agreed, but we came to the conclusion that, you know, we wanted to I guess, back the cops and them getting guns because we felt that it was safer for students as a whole to kind of come to that agreement. I mean, there were certain people who I don't want to call them hippies, but they were on the ed board and they were like, this is the worst thing ever. Like, pigs shouldn't have guns, and I was like, you need to relax. Like, I mean, there's definitely conflict and there's definitely difference of opinions, and more time than not, you're kind of bailed out with just reporting the facts, but when there's certain things that happen, it is kind of hard, and you do kind of ruffle some feathers sometimes. I lost friends because of the newspaper, and I've also made some too, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, when it comes to whether or not we should do something, we always make sure that majority of our editorial group agrees before we make any type of decision, because sometimes maybe, you know, one person will be like, yeah, let's run with it, and then everybody else is like, no, I hate it. And ultimately, it's the editor-in-chief's decision, though, whether they want to do it or not. Sometimes it can be kind of risky, like my first semester here, on staff, our editor-in-chief decided to run a naked girl on the front page of the paper, and it was for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So they painted the ribbon on her back, but we had a naked girl on the cover. And it was risky, and you know, some people didn't know what was going on until it came out in print, and he got some good feedback, but he also got a lot of negative feedback because there was a naked girl on the front of our paper. But when you're in a newspaper, sometimes you have to take risks, whether you're going to get backlash or not. And, you know, ultimately, people liked it, people picked it up. It was a very popular issue because we had a naked girl on the cover, so people were interested into why there was a naked girl on the cover of our paper. And it got a lot of comments, which is good. I mean, even if it's negative comments, at least people are noticing and they're picking it up and talking about it.
I think a lot, of times people's opinions and their personal feelings get like a lot in the way of a story choice. And it's what like you have to like step back and think, what do the students need to know, or what really is happening here? Like just because you feel like, you know, like for his story, you know, maybe you feel like it's like for the girl on the skateboard, like you feel like, oh, you know, let's have it be like the cop's fault, or let's have it be the girl's fault. It doesn't matter whose fault, like, you know, you think it was. It's what, you know, they say. You know, like people who saw it, all the witnesses say it was the guy on the cart's fault or something, then that's what you report. You know, over your semesters, if you can only take the class like 4 times, but like over your time there, your personal feelings kind of like, not like you like turn into a robot or anything, but they kind of, you learn how to separate them. You learn how to look at it from just a straight up like, this is the facts, this is what needs to be heard, this is what happened. You can't change what happened. We're not in like the business of making a story, like Becca said, sound better, or at the same time we're not in the business of making it sound any worse than what happened. We're here trying to just say exactly what happened, as boring as it may be to some people or how exciting as it may be. But your personal feelings, like, you know, you have to, in some cases, like, balance it out on what you want to run. So, like, we had, it was like 2 semesters ago when all, like, the break-ins happened and stuff. We got some backlash because some stories we ran, like, smaller print, smaller photos, second page, and layout, like, really matters to some people. And when our personal newsroom got broken into, we put it like on the big page, and there's a lot of controversy on that, should we run it like that? And when it got printed, a lot of people came back to us and said, why is your like newsroom on the front cover, but when our office got broken into, we got the second page and we were in the corner? And sometimes like people on the outside don't see what happens on the inside. Layout and design all matters on how big the story is. Sometimes we put stories on the front page because the photo's better. We want a more captivating photo. So maybe for their office break-in, we didn't get a photo. So how are we gonna put a story on the front page that doesn't have a photo? But ours, we obviously did get a photo because we're there. So those kind of things come into play too.
As a writer, have you guys ever felt the need to like exaggerate the truth a little bit or puff it up?
Oh, no. That's
You
one
get
thing
scared.
you never
Yeah.
should do. You never want to over exaggerate what happened, because it's kind of like you're lying almost, because you're making it sound bigger than what it was. And you never want to make it sound bigger than what it was, because if it's something minor, you know, like the break-ins, if you would have over-exaggerated that, people would have been like, oh my god, you know, they're breaking in, cops aren't checking on the campus, and we're just letting things happen, and, you know, what are they going to do next? They're going to start stealing, like, you know, out of people's backpacks and stuff during the middle of the day. You know, we don't want to over-exaggerate. We don't want to freak people out. You know, we want to tell the facts as they are. Whether it's minor or it's like a big thing that's going on, you want to tell it as it is, like straight up.